great to see you. How are things in Portland?
We're starting our second heat dome. And for those of you who don't know, we like to talk about the weather a little bit. The heat dome is going to get up to 110 degrees this week.
Wow.
And I heard it's hot out there. Peter, welcome from Minneapolis. Is that where you are?
That's where I am. Beautiful Nordeast, Minneapolis. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how's the weather out there tonight?
Tonight it's hot and humid. It's been about 90 today, and humidity is really high. But we've been blessed with rain for the past few days, which we haven't had for quite a while. So that's been very good. And I think we're back in a pattern of rain again. And I had it in my head that you were in Cali, Marnie, but yeah, but I'm sorry for all you're going through. Wow, that's a lot there. Yeah.
Well, I'm in Oregon now. We actually are climate refugees. The main reason we moved back to Oregon is because of the fires and the drought. So we have we have heat here, but we have water.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I thought there were some fires in Oregon as well, but yeah. So
anything
that's good.
Peter, how long have you lived in Northeast? That neighborhood's really undergone from what I hear, a pretty big transformation over the last 10, 15, 20 years. It
has. So my wife and I moved here in '98. I want to say, or we bought our first house Northeast. We were living uptown, and we bought our house I won't go through the explanation of it all, but kind of lower Northeast, which at the time was very kind of, neighborhoods were very siloed. It was kind of, people really didn't talk to each other much. And now I remember actually going into a bar by mistake with a friend of mine, and that whole thing, where everyone turns around and stares at you, everyone stops talking and stares at you. And then you're like, oh yeah, we're in wrong place. Yeah, we'll just go, over here. It was kind of like that. And then really not much time passed with that. And now that part of where we first moved was kind of that's now the hipster part of Northeast. It's been very gentrified, but there's a lot of really cool stuff there too. There's a lot of good, a lot of great art stuff going on there, and a lot of great restaurants and bars and things like that there. And then we moved, so we got a beat on this house, which is sort of up the hill, so to speak. And it's a much more kind of residential neighborhood, but it's a very neighborly neighborhood, and everybody's, so we've lived here for about, our tortured middle child turned 2 here, so about 18 years. In this
so you mentioned middle child. Who else lives in that place with you?
Well, so our tortured middle child, Ian, is also a student at Augsburg College. But with COVID, he ended up coming, because they were basically doing school from a dorm, and it's right across the river. There's no point in really him being there, especially if he's not going to be doing anything there. So he's been living here during COVID and stuff. He's looking to actually go back this fall. And then our daughter Maeve, who's our 15-year-old daughter, she also lives here. So she's going to be a sophomore in high school at the St. Paul Conservatory for Performing Artists. So she's a thespian, and that's her thing there. So those are the two that live at home. And then we also have a 25-year-old son who also lives Northeast, but in an apartment with some friends of his. So.
And do you have some horses back there?
We do have horses back here at a stable in our living room. They're actually Great Danes, but we have 2 Great Danes. One of them is he's about 3 years old. He's about 170 pounds. And then we have another one who is about she's a little bit over a year, and she's about 110, and she's still growing, but and she's very sweet and playful. So she's more the the little pony, the playful pony, where he's more like get off me, just get off me. It's fine.
When you take the dogs out, do you walk them or do they walk you? I mean, it's got to be hard to just kind of keep them on the leash, or.
Well, and that's the thing, if you have a dog that big, you have to make sure that they're trained. it's it's not a good situation if they want to get away. Bijou, who's the little one, who's the young one, she's still kind of learning, but she's getting better. And then Vladimir, who's the older one, is actually very good on a leash, so he'll walk right next to me. which is what you want. So that's good. And then, yeah, so you just have to make sure that you can keep them in control by commands, because you can't really overpower them. Like, especially him, it's like if he gets going, there's no stopping him. So, but he's fine, and he just wants to make you happy. And so that's all that matters.
Peter, I have a question, another question about Great Danes that I've been wanting to ask people.
Mhm.
Is there a certain kind of person who wants to have Great Danes in their home? Or is there a great diversity of Great Dane lovers?
Well, my wife was one who really wanted a Great Dane in the home. They're kind of famously very, they're very cuddly dogs. They're very clingy dogs. So like, it's the kind of dog that if you're walking around the house, they will follow you. You know, it's like, and they'll go where you go, that kind of thing. But they're very cuddly. They're very snuggly. They're not really, I mean, Bijou's still a puppy, so she's kind of high energy, but other than that, they're not terribly high energy. So they're kind of like, I would say a great dog for underachievers, for like type B personalities, because it's like, really all they want to do is sit around. And so if you like to sit around, they want to sit with you. And that's kind of the way it is. They don't need like as much exercise as like a lab, or, you know, like some of the more like what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the more energetic dogs. But you know, obviously they still need exercise and they like to get out. But so they're, in terms of maintenance that way, they're not as high maintenance. They definitely eat a lot more. And they have more coming out the other end. So there's that aspect of it too. But other than that, so I don't know. I would say the kind of person that likes a Great Dane likes to have an animal that, you know, they'd like to have it be affectionate with another animal. So that would be the kind of person that would like a Dane. They're supposedly really good apartment dogs, you know, oddly, because they're not all that active. Yeah.
If you can, yeah, assuming you can fit it in the apartment, right?
Exactly. I remember living in a studio, and there's no way that I could have I had a cat, and that was really all I could handle there. But yeah.
Peter, what do you do for a living?
So I've been working for the state of Minnesota, working for the Minnesota Department of Human Services as a maltreatment investigator. So investigating like a abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation and programs licensed by the department. So things like group homes, or like programs for people with chemical dependency, or programs for people with mental illness, or childcare centers, those kinds of things. So that kind of stuff.
That sounds like very challenging but very important work.
It can be really intense. It's interesting. It's kind of one of those things that it's for the most part not horrific, which it's one of those jobs you think would be. At times it can be very horrific, but you know, I would say for the most part it's not. And I guess the thing is too is that you also like kind of learn that, you know, it's a job where people make mistakes, and sometimes you know, it's like a lot of unfortunate things happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people are bad or horrible or anything like that. It's something we all are guilty of at some point, I guess, is how I look at it. But so that's kind of a lot of the way that it works. And sometimes there are people that deserve to be, you know, have a much greater punishment than we're able to mete out in our little administrative bureaucratic way that we slap them on the wrists, when really they should be in prison. And that's probably the most frustrating part of it, is like when you're not able to really do anything for something that needs to be done, that the cops should be doing something and they're not. So that kind of thing. So it's an interesting job anyway. Yeah.
How did you find your way into that type of work?
I worked for many years with people with developmental disabilities, and it's rewarding work, but you can't really make a living at it. So I was looking for other things, and I just kind of stumbled upon it. I actually, like when I showed up for the interview, I thought I was interviewing for a different job. And so I just kind of BS my way through the interview, but more and more I realized that it was a better fit for me than what I was actually applying for. So, so yeah, so that's kind of how I stumbled upon it.
And Peter, I have I think you were a Glen Lake guy, right? You grew up just north
Yeah.
of Highway 7, I think, back
That's
like
right.
in the kind of in the Pete Fisher, Toby Carroll neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I was 2 houses away from Toby. I grew up. Yeah.
And you and I, and we talked about this a little bit off air, but I remember you had a Cram Your Spam T-shirt in high school. I think I saw that in the yearbook. Maybe I remember you playing bass in a few bands, which maybe we can get to. But you and I had speech class together with in 8th grade, and we ended up giving speeches about each other, right? They paired off, and I don't know if you did this at North or not, Marnie, but somehow neither one of us remembered, which makes sense. But there was an interesting commercial with a firearm it was a pretty good story. Can you walk the audience through that, please?
Yeah, I remember. So it was something like we were supposed to reenact like a commercial or make our own commercial or something like that. And I remember it was supposed to be, I don't remember who I was doing it with, but it was like somebody was being robbed on Hennepin Avenue, which for us is like Hennepin Avenue. That was the horrible, of course, the awful part of Minneapolis. And now I live like right near Hennepin Ave. It's actually not, but yeah, in the day, because we were all thinking blocky, I think back in the day. But I had like a cap gun, and I remember like shot one of the guys with the cap gun and made the noise and that sort of thing. And everybody laughed. It was really funny. It was a great skit. The teacher loved it, that kind of thing. And I remember years later, when all this like the school violence stuff started and all of that, thinking back on that and how it's like, yeah, we would never get away with that. It's like, where, it's like high school started to have like these metal detectors, and kids would actually be searched and stuff like that. And then you'd have something like that. And you would be definitely suspended for, at least like trying to, threaten some kind of violence or something. But it's really funny how, yes, it was actually a far more innocent time than we thought it was.
Yes.
Yeah, my commercial, I do remember my commercial. It was, and it was funny because I don't think I drank a drop of alcohol until I got to college, but I did a beer commercial where it was, if you remember Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Oh, yes.
From SCTV. And remember Geddy Lee? They did that song Take Off with Geddy Lee. And it was like, ooh, woo, cuckoo, woo, cuckoo. And
one thing, just as a side note, on Saturday, I found that record and picked it up at a record store. So yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry, go on.
Hey man, this is your show.
No.
No,
go on. Yeah.
No, so it was, it's funny because like I said, we didn't remember each other's speeches, but we do remember the commercials we gave. But yeah, that was
like the beer, yeah.
That was a good class. I liked what was it? Cynthia, what do we say? Callard, something
I think
like that.
Cindy Calland, I think
She was good. She was good.
Sure. Yeah, she was. Yeah.
And so was there a teacher that you had in junior high or high school that has had an impact on your life?
Wow.
Besides your mother?
Besides my mother, yes. Which thankfully she never was my teacher, but she kept tabs on me through the other teachers, that was always fun. I would say probably Bob Stack. There's Barb Wilberg and Bob Stack are the two that stick out for me for high school teachers that I think had the biggest impact. So Bob Stack was, Barb Wilberg was an English teacher, and she taught creative writing and kind of was the person that instilled that in me, really, or like I was a poet for a time, and I still dabble in that a little bit, but it's like a love of poetry, love of literature, which I still have. It still sticks with me, and I still remember her very well. She was a very colorful lady. It was a great, very kind of irreverent, kind of anti-establishment sort of teacher, and just a wonderful free spirit person. And then there's with the other teachers, Bob Stack, and Bob Stack was the high school jazz ensemble director. And he really kind of encouraged me to play. I wasn't really very good. I remember so I'm sure maybe people remember Bob Paul, he was an orchestra. Well, he taught orchestras in different like elementary schools. I remember, I think he was directed it was Bob Hotel. There's some other people like that, but I remember I studied violin from him for, I don't know how many years, like 6 years, something like that. And I wanted to play bass to play rock and roll. And my parents were dead set against that. And they talked to him about that. And he was like, oh, that would be a wonderful idea. And, he's like, I think that would be great. Really, he, should just go with what he loves and, all those things. And I remember years later, he came up to me and he's like, yeah, this is the best decision you ever made to play bass, because as a violinist, you just were not making it at all. And it was like, the poor man having to sit through lessons like that, I'm sure. But so I ended up playing bass for many years. And that actually, obviously instilled, because I ended up, like when I was in college, I played in the jazz ensemble at Augsburg, and Bob was the director there too. He was also kind of instrumental in me being able to get into Augsburg in the first place. So I didn't really have the grades to do that. So that was wonderful. And so it kind of is a lifelong love of jazz and, just music in general too.
So music's still a big part of your life?
Yeah, I would say it is. And I'm more of a consumer. Like I collect records. My wife and I collect records, and I love to go through. There are a lot of great record stores that are back again. Back in the early 90s, there were some fantastic record stores, and then that all died when CDs came, and now there's a kind of a renaissance of records again. And so it's a lot of fun to go through the stores. There are a lot of really good stores. So and I'm just kind of very, I guess, kind of Catholic interests in music. I still love rock and roll. I love jazz. I love classical. I still very much kind of go back and forth through all sorts of different genres. Folk music, like you're talking about, Cram Your Spam, which I got at like a P9 rally at Orchestra Hall with like Arlo Guthrie was performing, I remember, and Larry Long and Holly Near, some of those, some great folk artists.
So what is P9 and how?
So P9 was the union. That was basically the union for Hormel Foods, and so Hormel busted the union, and it eventually ended up shutting them down. They ended up winning. So the P9ers went on strike, and eventually they were just kind of dissolved, and these people never went back to their jobs. And so that was what the whole, and that's kind of what the rally was about, and things like that, to try to help those workers, because those workers were basically just shoved out of Hormel for wanting better working conditions and better wages. I mean,
imagine that.
How selfish. I don't know. But yeah.
Well, this is related to your t-shirt and your fashion. So we need to have a shout out to all the viewers here. Laura Roth Green says hello. Chad Alt is here. Troy Finn is here. Some other folks, thanks for coming. And Chad has a fashion question for you.
Okay.
Peter, when did you lose the ponytail?
So I lost, it was probably, I want to say maybe 93. And I had a widow's peak that was ever growing, and like the back of my head, the ponytail, I was becoming more like David Crosby than I think anything else. And so eventually I just kind of went from that to shaving my head, So I kind of, it was one of those things that somebody was just like, well, you just have to embrace the bald. You can't just pretend that you're, you can't just have that one hair left on your head and comb it around, because you can. And I'm like, you're right. So I embraced the bald, and after kind of a transition period of a year or two, I would say by about like maybe 95 or 96, I've been bald. So,
thank you for answering the fashion question. Chris Camp Glazer is here. She says, hi, Peter, good to see you.
Oh, hey, yeah. It's great to hear from everybody, yeah.
So I heard you went to a concert recently.
Yeah, so another thing I love to do is go to live shows. And so we went to see, my wife and I went to see Patti Smith on Saturday night, this past Saturday. And it was like my first, I think, live show coming out of COVID. It was at Surly Field in Minneapolis here. So, and that was fantastic. And she's like one of, I think, like one of my, I don't know what you call it, like one of my favorite artists, I think, of all time. She's like an incredible artist, incredible performer. I've seen her maybe, I think this is the 5th time I've seen her, and it was just fantastic, and always is. So it was just it was an awesome show. Yeah.
Do you remember one of the first concerts you ever went to?
Yes. In fact, I remember going to see Deep Purple. I remember Toby Carroll and who else was there? So it was like 8th grade, maybe Mike Elliott, maybe Eric Knabb. I'm trying to think, like in 1984, seeing Deep Purple at the Met Center in Bloomington. And that was my first like big concert, and it was first big arena show, of course, but first really concert of anything. And it was fantastic. It still is burned into my memory as a wonderful, it's just an amazing show. So
I do remember you talking about that. I think it was in speech class. I think you just remarked how loud.
Right, and it was.
Purple had a reputation for being loud, but you said it was. You said, I remember you said it was ear splitting. Yet at one point I looked over and I saw some guy and his like girlfriend leaning right up against the speaker making out.
Right,
I just said, I don't know how you people are doing that. You remember that?
That is so funny. Yes, I do. That's amazing that you remember that. Yeah, no, I do remember that. And it was really, it was like incredibly loud. It was the first, I was like 14 and first big show like that. And they had like this big no smoking sign in Met Center. And then like at a certain point, you couldn't see the no smoking sign anymore because of all the smoke, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, that was, those were the days, I guess. But yeah, I remember that couple leaning against the stacks. And it was, and they were like, Deep Purple is famously one of the loudest bands like ever, or at least at that time they were, so it's really kind of funny.
So who was in the bands? Like, who did you play in bands with in middle school and in high school? Like I said, I remember you being a bassist, and there was, I don't know what it was like at North, Marty, but it was kind of cool at West. And it felt like there was always sort of 2 or 3 bands kind of, there's this group of guys that would play with each other for a while. Guys would defect back and forth, but there was always, Mike Elliott, I remember, was a pretty good guitarist. It was a decent scene, I remember. Yeah, no,
so I remember like, well, Toby, I grew up 2 houses away from Toby Carroll. And so Toby was a drummer. And so I was a bass player, obviously. So he was the drummer. So everything would happen at his house, and that's where everybody would go to play. But I remember, like in junior high playing with him and Mike Elliott, I think Steve Aggie sang. And then I remember, then later on playing with like Eric Croteville and Dave Book and some of those people. And then they went on to form like another band that actually, I remember I think it was it was Mulch, but in high school, but then out of high school, a lot of those folks were in a band called the Dust Bunnies that played like the local scene. Steve Murray was in there. Steve Murray is the bass player with that too. And then just like some other things with some other people, like Steve Ritzinger. And I'm trying to think of other, I'm drawing a blank for names of things, but I remember doing all sorts of just kinds of odd things. I had like tendonitis from playing upright bass. And so I couldn't play. And with a group of guys, we did Echoes from Pink Floyd for like a talent show. And that was really fun. John Stern, was the other guy that helped put that together. So some things like that. So stuff like that. And then outside of, and when I was, after high school, kind of, I was in college a few times, but kind of in and out for a while. I was in a band for a while, and we kind of played around Twin Cities a little bit, stuff like that. So I did some of those things, and obviously, played in college too for jazz ensembles and orchestras and stuff. But
do you ever play? Like, have you trotted out a bass or played around with a piano at all in the last 10 or 15 years, or you're done?
I still have my bass, and I have to. I just have to get. I have to fix it. It needs to be fixed, and I've got the wherewithal to fix it. I'd like to start playing again. And so I'm trying to get the stuff together to fix it. I used to have like a set of strings, which it badly needs, and for upright bass, strings are incredibly expensive. So I haven't been able to justify buying them yet. But I'm trying to get that back together. I do play guitar a little bit, and I have played that over the years, just for fun. It's just kind of something to do, kind of an outlet. And my son, actually, our tortured middle child, Ian, he plays guitar and bass, and he's actually learning drums right now too. So he's thinking about doing something with music that way as well. So that's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see him get into all those things that I was into.
Yeah.
But right.
Marty, when did you pick you picked up cello late in life?
Yeah, I was 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's great.
I was so jealous of my stepdaughter playing the violin. I was like, heck, I'm gonna do this myself. So I really enjoy playing the cello. It's never too late to get it out, but I can only
No.
imagine how expensive those bass strings can be.
Right. It's about, like for cheap bass strings, it's about like $300,
Yeah.
Yeah.
A piece?
Well, for a set of 4,
Oh, okay. But still, that's,
right.
Wow.
Right. But yeah, they're really like the ones that like orchestral players use, they're thousands of dollars. It's crazy. It's just insane. Yeah.
And you have horsehair, you have to restring your bow every once in a while, right? You
Right.
have horsehair on your bow
Yep.
as a bass player?
Yep. So.
But we have more people here. Doug Robertson
Oh,
is
wow.
here and says hello. He writes, I have strong, unspecific memories of Peter. Great to see you.
Is he going to share them?
I don't know. Well, it's
That'd be
Doug,
great. Like whatever impressions, like maybe just
Yeah.
impressions, or he could,
right?
he could paint something, just paint an
Right.
idea.
Yeah.
Something amorphous, but.
Well, one of the questions I have been finding interesting to ask people is, did you have a job in high school?
I did. I worked at Target Knollwood.
What was
in
that like?
in the health and beauty aids section.
No.
Yes. So I did that for, I think I was like, from when I was like 15 to when I was like 17.
Did you help people choose their products?
I did. I stocked the products, and I would actually, it's funny, it's like usually men would ask for help, not women, but like we're buying it for, their companion or something like that. But yeah, no, that was really funny. I remember too, like actually another kind of concert story, which is tied with Target, is I had put in my 2 weeks notice, and my last day of work, I was supposed to go to see Eric Clapton. And I know, like, again, with like Toby and a bunch of other folks, but so I was supposed to see Eric Clapton, and I was scheduled to work. And so I like called in sick, and the manager's like, no, you're not sick. And I'm like, well, I am sick. Finally, after going back and forth, I'm like, well, I'm not coming in. And so she's like, okay, well, you'll never work again, in this field. And I'm like, okay.
In this field.
This field. And so I went and we saw Eric Clapton, and it was a phenomenal concert. That's another one that was a great show. It's like Phil Collins played drums, Robert Cray opened. It was fantastic. It still stands out in my brain as being just an amazing show. Years later, I applied for a job at the Kmart on Lake Street. And I went through the interview, and they're like, well, you've got the job as long as that, reference from Target comes through.
Oh no.
And, so yeah, so we'll give you a call and tell you when to come in. Of course, I never heard back from them after that. I think it was like,
how many years later was that?
That was like, I don't know, it's like maybe 5 years later or something like that, 4 or 5 years later.
So what was your boss, right? You never did work in that field again?
I never did. I actually worked at like a Sam Goody in the conservatory eventually, I think, but that was a whole different thing. And they obviously never called Target for the reference, but yeah. So it's
wow.
That's my Target story. So all those years.
But it sounds like it was worth it. It was worth it to see Clapton. Seriously.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's not a regret at all. But I just think that's a really kind of a funny little side note to that. As I was employee of the month for, I don't know how many months, and, and then that's what they do to me. Yeah. Didn't get that job at Kmart that I always wanted, but.
So what other shows did you see in high school? Because it's like, I remember hearing, remember when they actually used to like advertise concerts on the radio, when people actually listened to terrestrial radio? Like I remember hearing Eric Clapton with Robert Cray opening up. So I like, who else did you see in high school that was particularly memorable as far as shows?
Boy, and it's not, well, I remember there were good shows, but I remember like going to, like, they would have concerts after like remember the Strikers, the Minnesota Strikers was like an indoor soccer team. They would have concerts afterwards, I think, as a way, because I think, the attendance was waning and they're trying to get people in the place. And so we saw, like, I remember seeing Three Dog Nights and like Blood, Sweat and Tears and like Bachman Turner Overdrive. It was really kind of funny. And for some reason, those stand out. Those aren't necessarily, they're great bands, but they're not, terribly memorable in other ways. But so I remember, that, and just a bunch of other ones too. And I can drawing a blank as to other ones, but there were other shows too. Like I remember seeing Rush in high school. That was really good. I don't remember who all else, but yeah, there were a bunch of those.
Yeah, classic rock for the music snobs at West, Marty, and I don't know what it was like at North, but classic rock was very much, I think, kind of held up as the standard, right? I mean, like it wasn't, but it's funny because, you know, looking back, there were so many innovative bands coming out of Minneapolis at the time, like the Suburbs and Prince and the Replacements. But and at least for me, that wasn't really in, you know, frankly, I kind of had my take. I kind of followed the crowd as far as, you know, like in the Who and bands like that. But it's funny because we were very much, it felt like stuck, you know, we were kind of looking back 20 years, you know, 20, 15 years as far as the music we were really into.
And, you know, and it's funny that you say that because I was like when I talk about with people is that I feel like I kind of missed the 80s punk scene.
Yeah.
You know, like I got into that later. I discovered all those bands later on, like not in junior high and not in high school, really. And they were kind of on the fringe. I knew people who were into them, but it wasn't. You're right. It's more like the classic rock stuff. Or I was looking into. I remember too, like I was into other bands as well. Like I really liked Peter Gabriel. I liked Kate Bush. I liked and still like a lot of folk acts and things like that too. So I was always listening to a lot of different things. But yeah, I'd say for the most part. I missed out on a lot of those things too. So I kind of had to discover the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I got turned on to the Replacements by my freshman year roommate in college, who was from Birmingham, Alabama. It's just kind of weird. And by the time I graduated from college, I just worshiped those guys. But it was like, well, they're broken up, so I've never seen them. But
if I'd only known, I could have gone to the entry. But
yeah, well, it's funny. I do remember hearing, Pat Delaney. Pat and I played hockey together, and I remember in middle school, like we played. Actually, first year I think I ever played on a team with him was 9th grade, and I remember Pat, I think, talking about going to Replacements shows with his older brother Kevin, who I think Kevin went to Blake. I don't think he went to Hopkins High School, so they were at least kind of on my radar a little bit. But like even my brother Leaf, who was very much into, kind of contemporary music. I don't feel like the Mats were even kind of on his, I guess he was more of a new wave guy, maybe.
Right.
But I mean, like you said, it's just weird that there was this sort of whole kind of punk scene going on, and it just, it didn't really bubble up on a lot of our collective radar, I guess.
Do you think it's in part because of the musicians? Like the student musicians play classic rock? Because I might say, like when I think about the musicians from West and the bands, I think more classic rock, and maybe some of like the North kids, like Eric Falseth. He was talking about some of the first AV shows he went to. It's curious.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. It was, I even remember like reading about the Replacements, but I never really pursued that, and I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't, but. I'm not sure why it is, because I think, and I suppose a lot of the musicians played classic rock.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where a lot of like especially like rock musicians kind of start out like learning. That's the stuff that you generally learn. It's like learning the jazz standards or whatever. You're gonna start out by playing Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones or those kinds of things, and then move on to other stuff. But
speaking of student bands, one of the shows we're trying to put together is for members of the Todd Ames Blues Band in Review. And so, Peter, do you remember the Todd Ames Blues Band?
I didn't play in it. I know that. I vaguely remember it. It's like, because a lot of the like band folks were in it, played in like concert band. I think if I remember correctly, I don't know that I do, but I remember, like a lot of because I think there were horns, there were different things like that.
Horn section,
yeah. So no, I guess I am thinking of the right thing.
Who would have played? You don't recall any of the horn musicians by any chance?
I know. I want to say that like maybe Rich Lindstrom, he played like tuba or euphonium.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he played tuba. I think, and then I think didn't Jason play euphonium?
Jason was a baritone guy.
The baritone, okay. But some other, trying to think of like, off the top of my head, I can't remember names. I've got a mind like sludge.
Well, you would think that someone has like someone must have a picture, Marnie. Someone. You would think, but
you would think.
Well, but you should ping Sam Siegelman. Sam will know.
Oh, Sam will
Yeah.
know.
Sam was in the band. I think he was sort of, I don't know if Sexton made that comment. He was the guy running around with duct tape on his nipples, acting crazy. He was,
Right.
and I don't know if any of you are into the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones.
Yeah.
I mean, but they have a guy who literally all he does is dance. I think Sam Siegelman was the original band dancer. It wasn't Ben Carr from the Boss Tones. It was
Right, and that there's somebody like that in the time too. I forget his name, but yeah, it was like
yeah.
he was the hype man. Yeah,
he was like the butler guy.
Morris Day.
He'd hold up the mirror for Morris Day.
Yeah,
right?
he would. He was the guy that we'd hold the coat. He would do like the James Brown coat thing, and but to get back to the Todd Ames Blues Review, I remember. I don't know that I ever saw them actually, but I remember like it going on. I remember like hearing them practice and things like that. But it was
Well, they only played like 2 shows, right? They played like winter
Sure.
games, and they played a dance one night, like one Friday night. I remember.
Right.
They were on the theater stage. I just remember like the theater stage being full of them. But okay, just curious, Peter. So what else, is there anything else that you want, any other memories from high school that you thought about when you were getting ready to come on the show?
I think those are that hits a lot of them. I have a lot of strange memories from high school, but I think those are some of the main ones. I remember, actually, I was thinking about, I remember some of the like choir groups. We did like barbershop quartets and things like that. That was a lot of fun. I still think back on that like fondly as that was great, where we were able to go, like you would have like Valentine's Day, you'd be able to sing Valentine's
the heartograms, right?
The heartograms, yeah, stuff like that, and that was a lot of fun. I remember going to I think it was like Aaron Larson, Chad Alt, and I forget who else was in my quartet, but like we went to the industrial arts area and got these red jackets for like a program that they had, and and then put like hearts over the name of whatever it was, because I promised I wouldn't defile the program or anything like that to get those. It was an industrial arts teacher, and then running around in that and singing, and that was a lot of fun.
And you got to miss like
craziness.
You get to miss like a full week of classes for that.
At least a couple days. I don't know, or at least 1 or 2 days, but yeah. But that was a lot of fun. That sticks out in my head too. So yeah.
And there's one topic we haven't brought up, which is a surprise, Eric, which is sports. Peter, were you on the soccer team?
I was not.
You're not.
I was not, but my storied athletic career was in cross country and cross country skiing, where I was always in that battle for last place in all the races, and it would always be like the one with that other kid, and we'd always be like, I'm not going to be last. I'm not going to be last. Yeah. So that was my athletic experience. But what was great about that is there were like wonderful people that were a part of it, like cross country, both cross country and cross country skiing. And so it was never like, nobody cared if you were any good or not. Everybody, it's like you're always going for your personal best, and like we knew the guys that were like would actually score the points and would actually be the ones to actually win the meet. But but everybody was like able to be a part of it, and everybody was welcome, and so that was really cool. It was a really cool experience there, where it wasn't any sort of one-upsmanship or anything like that, but you're still part of a team, so it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
I didn't know a lot of the cross country guys, but the cross country ski team, John Cookett, Rich Lindstrom, Vic Hang.
Yeah.
I think Sandham did it for a couple of years. Jason Joyce. I mean, that was a
right.
That was a real good group. And Marnie, I'm going to take it away from sports and kind of take it back to music.
Okay, that's fine with me.
But believe it, it's
me.
And I don't know what it's like for I had my wife and I had our daughter relatively late in life. I was 40 when she was born. She's 11 now. And she's a cellist, and she starts middle school next year. And orchestra only meets once a week.
It's terrible.
I know. We're not in the best school district in the Boston metro area, but it's certainly probably, I think it's top 10. And I'm like bummed, because it's like I just Yeah, it's just it's sad. It is
because I think
once
for
a
me,
week it's a nuisance if you do it once a week, right? You don't learn anything. You don't get any better.
right. You know, I remember like for junior high and high school, both, it's like that was first hour
Yeah.
every day, you know, and high school, I wasn't always there on time, which is kind of an issue. I remember my senior year, but yeah, it was, but yeah, that's sad. That's really sad that they're only doing once a week.
I think it's the short-sightedness of some school board members. I mean, it takes a very, you have to be very intentional to cultivate those programs and keep them going. And, it was something when I was on the school board, I cared a lot about.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think the world needs people like that who care about music like that, because it's so important. And yeah, and especially I think like for classical music, it's like you have to start them young and keep pulling them up. And I remember like now it's like the Minneapolis schools, like I went to like one of their concerts a few years ago, like was like an all district concert, and they couldn't fill an entire orchestra. So they were taking like all the schools, all the programs and mushing them together, and it wasn't enough to make a complete orchestra. And it's just sad, so.
Peter, you said your daughter goes to, it sounds like maybe a magnet school in St. Paul for the performing arts. Did your two boys, your 25-year-old and your 20-year-old, did they go through the Minneapolis public schools, or did you end up finding alternatives for them as well? Because
yeah, we ended up
doing it for you.
We ended up finding alternatives for them for different reasons. I mean, for academic reasons and for a lot of reasons I won't get into, but things that they weren't that we didn't feel they were getting support on, that they needed support for, and there just isn't the money to have people to do that. So like both of them were on IEPs, and you wouldn't have people working with them on things, and so they would just be like kind of left to fail. So we ended up doing charter schools with them, and kind of a mix of like charter schools and private schools, but it all worked out for both of them. So good. That's good.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else you want to share or anything you want to ask Eric before we go?
I thought Peter gets asked the questions. I didn't know.
What's it all about, Eric? What's it all mean? Tell me, what's it all mean?
What's with the British accent?
I don't know. I feel like if you're going to ask a question like that, you have to do it with the British accent. Right.
What's it all mean? I don't know. I will say tip of the cap to Jason and Marnie for getting this started in the pandemic, and I'm awestruck by the fact that, how many shows is this, Marnie?
63rd, I think.
Yeah, and this is a really cool thing that you guys are doing, and it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with this. So,
well, we are really grateful that you joined us. As everyone can remember, we have this on our Facebook page. We will post it in the future on YouTube. Yes.
And Marnie, I'm sorry, I forgot. Second week in a row, I forgot to do this until the very end. Who's coming up on the show?
Oh my God. Oh no, I don't have the spreadsheet. Well, so next week we have Todd Brockman joining us. Oh. And I heard a rumor that Rick Marker might crash the Zoom.
Wow.
So everyone better get ready for that.
And what's going on with Peter Graff, the North Junior High legend?
So I don't have confirmation yet, Eric, and everyone, but we will get a date for him, and then hopefully you can convince Mr. Tony Cobb to pick one of the dates. I'll send you.
Wow.
Cobber's in. He's just waiting to be called. I think he just happened to have a conflict the last time I texted him. So
I think we should just book Tony Cobb on August 24th.
Okay.
Because we are going to make sure we have to prioritize our students, our colleagues, our students before the staff. I'm sure Peter will be okay with that. And Natalie Ojeda George says, good to see you, Peter, and everyone. Chad Alt has a bunch of comments, Peter, so you better go check them out.
Okay.
And this was really great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. So
you're welcome. Thanks, Eric. See you next week.
Thanks, Eric. We'll see you both later.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Adios. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.